Mac Power Users, episode 697, A Niche of a Niche. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks. I am joined by your friend and mine, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
Very, very well, my friend. I am enjoying life. I've got all these betas installed. I've got multiple devices on the table in front of me as we do the show today. It feels like mission control here, so that's going to be fun. And it's time for a feedback show, but we also have a bunch of feedback as we've been trying things and kicking the tires since WWDC. Man, it sure was great seeing you there.
Yeah, it was great seeing you. I went from WWDC straight into a family trip on the East Coast, so I'm recording in a bedroom in a rental house. So I have not spent as much time in the betas as you have. We'll get into that in a minute. But yes, a very busy couple of weeks around MPU HQ.
Yeah, I was at like the media center part of the visitor center, and Stephen kind of got out of an Uber and walked from me. It was like Harry met Sally. We ran, gave each other a hug. It was nice.
It is nice. It's good to see everybody.
Yeah, I do miss that we all seem to get together more often, before COVID, and hopefully that starts to get better now.
I think it will.
We do have a lot on the agenda today, so I guess we should just dig right in. First thing is, as this show goes live, dear listener, you can buy the third and final Apple History Calendar.
The trilogy. That's the language I'm using.
Okay, it completes the trilogy. You're kind of like Ted Lasso. You're leaving the door open a little bit, right?
That's right. I could come back and do a prequel in 10 years.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, Stephen has been hard at work. As his friend, I've been we talk constantly as we're prepping the show. He is always working on this Apple History Calendar. Well, now you can get it. Stephen, tell us about the 2024 Apple History Calendar.
Yeah, so this is my third calendar in 3 years. It's a wall calendar, but there's also a digital version. So if you want it like in the calendar app alongside your other events, you can do that. The first one focused on Apple's hardware products. The second one focused on Apple's software products. And so this one kind of rounds it out, talking about services and retail. The calendar is probably a little bit more biased towards services, but I have a lot of cool retail stuff in there as well. And it follows kind of the format of the previous two, where you can get digital stuff, you can get wallpapers, you can get the wall calendar, which is sort of the joke in it is, instead of regular holidays, you have dates where things happened in Apple history. And so you can flip to like March and see, okay, well, in March 1997, Apple had this weird idea about something on the internet. And let me tell you, Apple used to have a lot of weird ideas about the internet. A lot of services have come and gone. And you can get that wall calendar. You can get some stickers. There's a bunch of stuff. It's all at the link. It's the first link in the show notes. And I'm super excited to be doing it again. And like I said, it completes the trilogy. Apple's hardware, software, and services. That's kind of how they operate. And I feel like this captures all of that. But we'll see what happens in the future. So if you've gotten one before, I think you're going to love this one just as much. And if you haven't, I think it's a great year to jump on board.
Yeah, and the photography is always amazing in them.
Thank you.
My recommendation is, this is what I've been doing this year, is I do not look through the pages when it shows up. Mm-hmm. Instead, as the new month arrives, I get to turn it over and get a little present with a new picture.
That's cool.
Although I do think, since it's about Apple services, I think you priced it wrong. I think it should have been like a monthly price.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
A subscription model.
If you don't pay me, you don't get the next month of the calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's good. The photography this year has some fun surprises in it. I have a custom illustration done for the cover. I have a guest photographer for one image. Lots of fun stuff. And I think it's going to be, I really think it's the best one of the three. I'm really, really happy with it.
Nice. And you can get it right now. We've got a link in the show notes. Go check it out on Kickstarter. I have already ordered mine. Also, the stickers are awesome. Every year, Stephen gives you some amazing stickers that you can use on stuff. And they're just really fun stickers. I don't know who does the artwork for those.
It's our friend Jelly. His name is Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah, he writes gift wrapped, and he also does the artwork for the St. Jude fundraiser we do at Relay. So if you've seen my cartoon head on social media, he did that. And we're still working on the stickers. So the last couple of years, I've sort of announced the stickers like halfway through the Kickstarter. My plan is to do that this year as well. So keep an eye out for that. I'll be sure to talk about those once the artwork is final. But the stuff is really, really cool.
I just want to make a pitch for one sticker. What was the name of that music social service that they made that lasted like 6 months? What was it called? You remember talking about? It was in iTunes.
iTunes Ping. There was Ping.
We need a Ping sticker. I want a Ping sticker.
I want people to like the stickers,
Yeah. Either way, go check it out, gang, on Kickstarter. Help support Steven. Get a great calendar. I mean, these calendars, they show up in Apple Park. Everybody loves them. And not only is the artwork great, I love Steven's little trivia he's got on the various dates. And just a great product. And thanks, Steven, for adding this to the world. Today on More Power Users, we are going to get into CarPlay. We did a whole show on it a while ago, but we've got some announcements through WWDC. And we've been getting some questions about it. So Stephen and I want to go into a little deeper on More Power Users. That's the ad-free version of our show where you get to show sans ads, and you also get some extra content every week. So you can check that out at the website at relay.fm/MPU. But let's get started, Stephen, with the beta check-in. Where are you now?
Yeah, so the only thing I'm running is iPadOS 17. And that's mainly a side effect of going from one coast to another, like one day at home in between. So I'm running it on my iPad mini. So I can't really speak to Stage Manager, but spent a good bit of time with it on the mini. I do have a M1 MacBook Air that will get Sonoma on it basically as soon as I get home. These betas you really need to be running more than one of them if you're covering them, which is our job. Our job is to talk about these things both here and other places. And so many of these features rely on one another. So I'll have it on a Mac and an iPad here pretty soon. And I will jump on iPhone OS. How old am I? iOS 17.
Wow. Yeah, that is old.
Probably sometime in July.
Yeah. So I took, I'll say, a slightly different approach. I was downloading it in Cupertino on my phone and my watch. I have two iPads. I have a big one that sits at my desk, kind of the status board. That is still on the prior operating system, but my little mini is on the new one. And I have the MacBook Air on Sonoma, and I've got the production machine. The big MacBook is on what is it? I forget what was last year's.
The current one's Ventura.
Ventura. There we go. Yeah, it's on Ventura, and the new one is on Sonoma. Sonoma, by the way, good name. We didn't talk about that in the live show, but I thought that was a good one. Good choice.
Yeah, I realized that after we were done. It's like, oh, we have a California native on the show. Oh, I'm always curious. Yeah. I think the name's great, and if you want to run the wallpaper for Sonoma, but not run the beta, I've got you hooked up. There's a link on 512 where you can download them. I always race to get those out as soon as I can.
Yeah, that's a good thing you do over there. So I've got it running on a lot of stuff. I've got it running on more things than I don't have it running on at this point. And now that we're recording this, it's been a few weeks, and I'm pretty happy. But I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about what we're doing with them. But there's a couple things you always have to say when betas come up. The first thing is, don't put it onto the thing that you use to make money, because that might not work anymore. I have this, like the reason it's not, the reason I have Ventura on my production machine is there's several apps that I use to make podcasts and screencasts, and they don't work with the new system. That's just always the case. The other thing is, this is your opportunity to be supportive of app developers. Don't be a jerk. I told this story on the show before, but I tell it every year because I just can't get over it. 3 or 4 years ago, I was at WWDC. After the big keynote, they do a thing called State of the Union, and that is where Apple kind of gets more nerdy, where the WWDC keynote is kind of for the general public. In State of the Union, they get down to APIs and kind of like, well, how are we going to make all this stuff work? And you learn a lot more. So it's really good to watch it. But I was sitting next to a developer friend, and that takes place like an hour and a half after they finish the keynote. Usually they do the keynote, there's a lunch break, and then they do State of the Union. So I'm sitting next to an app developer friend who shall remain nameless, but a lot of listeners would know who this person is. And he's getting complaint emails while we're sitting there in the State of Union from users saying that his app is broken and it doesn't work in the new beta, and they're leaving him negative reviews. Okay, guys, this was an hour and a half after it got released.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I was so shocked by it because you hear developers say, "Hey, man, don't give me a hard time. You know, it takes a while to get this started." But this happened. I just was shocked, and he's like, "No, this happens every year." And the problem is those reviews show up, and they're negative reviews of an app. It hurts this person's ability to make money because people read the negative review. Don't be that guy. And I don't think our listeners are, but I just wanted to tell you there are people out there doing it. So if you do get on the beta, what you can do is you can say, "Oh, this thing's not working. I'm going to write a nice little email to the developer telling them what went wrong and ask them, you know, if they know about it, if there's anything I can do to help them."
Mm-hmm.
And just be cool. Don't give them a negative review.
Yeah, they're going to get a lot of that, especially when the public betas roll out. And I mean, we have a lot of friends who write all sorts of apps and programs and services from the Mac all the way to the watch and everything in between. And it's stressful. It's stressful because they are trying to hit a deadline of September to make sure not only will their app work, but it's a big deal in the App Store to have features on day one for the new operating systems. So this year, I think probably the example most people would care about the most is interactive widgets. Yeah. And they're working to get all that done while their kids are home from summer and they're trying to go on family vacation and all of those things. So yeah, don't put fuel on that fire for them. I do like the approach though of like, hey, I'm running the beta. This is what I'm seeing. You know, sometimes they'll have a beta or a test flight or something for the new OS, but you can't, you know, guarantee that. So yeah, the standard thing, we say this every year, if you use your Mac or your phone or your iPad to make your living, don't do this yet. And if you do, know that things may be a little weird in places, and that one tool you really need is just probably the one that's not going to work.
The other thing across the board is understand if you put betas on, your batteries will die. So if you've got a device that runs on battery, the last thing they fix is battery life optimizations. You get that at the very end in like September. So that's part of beta life. My Apple Watch Ultra no longer is a 2-day. It's a 1.5 day watch. My iPad and iPhone can sometimes be less than a day if I'm not careful. So just make sure that if battery life is critical to you, then you should not be running betas because that just kind of comes with the territory. All right, that said, and we're going to do shows on these new operating systems when everything releases. I thought it'd be fun to just kind of go through the platforms and talk about some general impressions after early running. And granted, some of these features might not be there in September, but I get a feeling most of the ones we're going to talk about will be. They're all pretty solid at this point. Mm-hmm. And maybe just overall, I think it's a pretty solid beta year. I haven't heard what the general tenor is from our other podcasting and developer friends, but me personally, they've all been running pretty good. There's a few little issues here and there, and I can mention some of them, but there have been much worse years for me in beta world than this year.
Yeah, that's good. I suspect that the changes we're seeing, you know, what we've seen from Apple so far is mostly feature changes. I don't think they did a lot of scooping around in the guts of these operating systems this year, which leads to stability and those sorts of things. I will just interject here before you go on. The interactive widget comment made me think of it. Sometimes during the beta cycle, like you don't actually get to see some of the new features because they are all in the third-party realm. So right now, the only interactive widgets out there probably are Apple's. And maybe if you're on a test flight or something, you know, developers are working on that. So sometimes it takes a while, even on the betas, to kind of really, where they really feel like something new. And I think there's probably a lot of that this year.
Yeah, agreed, because so much of it does relate to third parties. And we can mention that as we go through it. But let's start with the Mac. We are the Mac power users. And you were mentioning the widgets. Widgets on the desktop, my impression after having it now for a little while is I like these more than I thought I would. I think it's kind of great. It does, you know, if you're somebody who likes to have a super clean desktop and everything, you lose that. If you like really cool wallpaper, you lose some of that. But even the way it kind of fades in and fades out, it's nice. And I like the fact that when I have it on my desktop, I have useful, actionable information in front of me. I've only got the Mac stuff, the Apple stuff running now, obviously, because it's too early for most of these third-party apps. But the stuff that's there is great. I do like the feature where it fades out when it's not kind of like the desktop is not active, so it kind of grays behind. It's not too interfering. And just overall, I mean, you and I have both asked for this now for years. It's been something we both wanted. I think you said something along like, bring it back, you cowards.
Yeah, bring dashboard back.
But I, having used it now, I think it's fun and fine. I've read some folks complaining that they don't want it on the desktop. They want it like a dashboard thing where you swipe to it and it's there or it's not there. I don't really feel that strongly about that. I guess if they had done it as a dashboard, that would have been more historically, consistent with what they did with dashboard. But if I had to choose, I think I would choose what Apple chose to do here. I like the idea of it just being there and turning my desktop into a dashboard of useful information without requiring further action.
Yeah, and it's more conceptually in line with how it works on the iPhone and iPad, right? Where you have your widgets basically intermixed with the app icons on your device. Now, the Mac only has that in Launchpad, which I don't think many people use. And so having it on the desktop intermixed with your files, it's a similar level in the OS, I think. So I think it makes a lot of sense there.
Something I can tell that I like it is that I use that laptop a lot. I've been trying to work on that thing as much as possible. And then when I log into my main machine, like this morning when we were getting ready to record, I'm like, where are my dashboard widgets? I mean,
wow.
You just kind of, you start to get used to having them there. Like one of the really nice ones I have is it just has a list of my calendar events. I actually have two calendar ones. One has the monthly calendar and the other one has a list of events. And that is quite useful. Several times a day, I'll take a look at that as I'm working through my day. So this is going to be nice. I think a lot of people are going to like it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. So, it's just the perfect kind of little additional thing. A thought that occurred to me earlier when you were talking is I do feel like the reason there's not a lot of under the hood stuff is we went through that for like 4 or 5 years. I feel like, the transition, the Apple Silicon stuff, they have been working really hard to kind of like build a foundation that Swift UI sits upon. And I feel like now we are reaping the rewards of that. Not only are these updates more feature focused as opposed to system level focused, but they're also across all the platforms too. I mean, all that stuff. And I feel like they're more fully fleshed out in the early betas because they didn't have to rewrite the whole underpinnings of the operating system to make it work. So it's just overall kind of much nicer experience than we've had in the past.
What happens now if you click the clock? Is it just notifications over there on the side now?
Yes.
Okay. So they take the whole space over there?
Yeah. Well, it swipes in just like it did with the widgets before. And they you can still use the 2-finger swipe to bring them in and out, but clicking the clock also brings them in. All of this has also got me interested in Stage Manager again. I tried it last year and it didn't really stick with me. I'm trying it again as an automator and somebody who likes to really focus on what I call setups. It's an interesting paradigm because you can quickly jump between setups just with the little options on the left or the right, wherever you got your Stage Manager setups there. And on a big screen, it's not really a big deal to give up that real estate for it. The automation story, I'm not entirely sure. I've been working with Moom to have Moom set the windows for me so I can make it more automator friendly. But, every beta season, I like to kind of try Apple's things and just see how well they stick with me as I'm going through that. That also applies to the productivity apps we'll be talking about later. And the moving desktop wallpaper, that was the surprise to me. Like, that was a little bit in the keynote. Like, they made this cool, like, I guess, high-end drone footage through mountains and lakes and space and all this stuff. I enabled those, and I think they're gorgeous. I mean, they really look good when you open your Mac, and it's like kind of like moving through the Alps. And then once you unlock it, it just kind of comes to a nice slow stop, and that becomes your desktop wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
This, I don't know. There's always like, this is not a power user thing, but I really like that. And when you combine that with the widgets that just kind of float in on top of them, it is a nice look. It really is.
What about the iPhone and iPad? Yeah, like I said, the iPad's the only one I've played with. So maybe let's start with the phone. How's all that going?
Stickers are fun. And this stuff was not rocket science before. We mentioned it on the episode we recorded up at Apple, but I really felt like, and this is something that's bugged me, but I've never verbalized it, but I felt like the messages interface was wonky, right? If you wanted to add things, quite often it took several taps to get to the content. And the new interface is just very streamlined. There's a little button, you press it, and then all the categories list out. Do you want to add a photo? You want to add a sticker? Whatever. And you click it, and then you put it in. So the ability to add attachments to messages, I think, is going to make it so more people add attachments to messages. The sticker thing, where you drag out an image, which is just kind of them capitalizing on prior technology. That was I believe, a 2-year-old feature now, where you can grab a photo and remove the background of a person by just dragging the person or the dog or whatever out. Now you can turn it immediately into a sticker. That's fun. However, it does not work backwards. So I've been sending stickers to my family. They weren't getting them. The only way I can get it to work to them is to put it in the text field of the message, and then it sends as an image. But
Okay.
you can't just drop it on like a sticker. We are in beta 1 here, gang. So my guess is at some point they're going to make it backwards compatible or not. I don't know. Maybe that's their way of getting you to upgrade in September. But it's a nice feature, and I think that's something cool. The other thing that surprised me at how much I'm enjoying it is Nightstand.
Yeah, this is the feature I think we talked about on our live episode about it making a lot of sense on the iPad as well. But you put your phone on a MagSafe charger horizontally, and you get some widgets there. Is it easy to set up what widgets you want there? Like, how does that work? Where do you get to that?
Yeah, so there's 3 screens. You swipe horizontally, and the first screen has 2 widgets. And if you long press on it, then you can select among different ones. And it's very similar to widget selection on the watch or the iPhone and iPad. And you can say, well, here's the clock. And it says, well, these are the various clock faces you can get. And there's a limited number, but there are things there. And then you say, well, I also want the monthly view. So it gives you the month view. Or so you could have on the left side, like the clock, on the right side, the month with the dates in the month. Or you could have it show your flagged tasks and reminders or your upcoming appointments. So you can decide what you want on those 2 halves of the screen. Now, you can set them independently. When you put your phone in horizontal mode, they just show up. I can send you a picture of it, and we can maybe put it in the show notes so people can see it. But it's really cool. My complaint about it, and I'm submitting feedback, which is another tip I'd give. If you're going to do the beta, please give feedback to Apple. Is the text is too big on the events and tasks because they just don't fit. But it's really nice. Now, that's like one swipe. Now, if you swipe horizontally, one swipe from there, then it's got a photo mode where it becomes like a picture gallery. And it has the time, but it also shows you pictures, and you've got some control over what pictures it shows you. But it's like having a picture frame on your desk. And that's where I think this thing would be great on an iPad. And it does have the time, but it's really just nice pictures, and it's kind of fun to look at that all day. And then if you do one more swipe horizontally, they are very simplified clocks. And I think this is the one there for the bedstand mode, right? Where you put it next to your bed. They've got digital and analog clocks, some that show you more detailed information like the day of the month or the weather. Some of them that just have a very simple analog clock. And they've got a setting in it where you can say at nighttime when it's dark, make the clock face red. so it doesn't light
Nice.
up the room. And you've also
Yeah.
got a setting that says, turn off the display unless you detect activity. And it does. I mean, I had a poor night's sleep last night, and I would lay in bed, look over, and be empty. But as soon as I start moving around, it would light up with the time, and then it would go out. So it doesn't light up the room all night. So I feel like this is very well implemented. And when they announced it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute and clever. But it's actually, I find it immediately useful. And I keep my phone on the stand horizontally all day. Now it's just been a week, but I'm already sold on it. And I've got one that I use at my desk during the day that's more kind of productivity enabled. And then at night, I use the most simple clock, but it's nice to have a clock there.
Yeah, I've gotten used to, as I'm sure a lot of other people have, bumping my nightstand for my watch to wake up its screen in nightstand mode.
Yeah.
'Cause if I'm not sleeping with it, that's what I'll do. I'll just bump it and see the time or whatever. So that all sounds really exciting. My MagSafe charger on my nightstand, it lays flat. So this may end up being one of the docks that I'd change out at some point over time.
Yeah. And because the way it works, if you have a MagSafe dock, it remembers what your settings were. Like the settings at my desk are different than the ones at my bed.
Sure.
And I had a non-MagSafe one next to my bed, and I've already ordered a puck, and I'm gonna switch it because it's just so nice, And I feel like this was a real, we keep saying quality of life, but that's really the theme this year. It's just all real good, and that one was cooler than I thought it would be. I am getting some errors with respect to messages. The Messages app is the one that's giving me the most bugs. And the one I keep seeing is that it will render a keyboard on top of previous messages. So you got to read your messages and you can't see anything below it because it's text. And if you close the app and reopen it, it works most of the time. It's not like one of those things you have to restart the phone, but that does happen once in a while. But that's honestly the most annoying bug I've seen on all the platforms so far. Well, you've got the iPad. What do you think of the new Stage Manager?
Well, I've got the mini, so I don't get Stage Manager.
Oh, that's right.
I do have some lock screen widgets set up. My iPad mini's in a smart cover folio case, whichever one it is on the mini. And so I don't see the lock screen a whole lot. But I think when I get home, I'm going to give the iPad mini a run as like a secondary status display, like you've talked about in recent years, but just using the lock screen this time. I think that part is really going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, nice. Although I would recommend, if you're going to do the status display, you got to go further, especially with now the live widgets. Like I am so tempted to install the beta on my big iPad because I want live widgets, but I do some screencasting stuff, and I just can't have a device that's not on the shipping operating system right now. But,
sure, yeah.
That is a battle I fight in my head every day, Stephen. It's hell in there. All right, on the watch, I think we should touch on that because the watch is really got significant improvements this year. And the thing they did, it's not rocket science, but they just kind of changed the visual paradigm of the watch. Historically, you would have various things that happened with the little digital crown. But if you wanted to get to other apps, you had like your bookmarked apps. I think that's what they called them, bookmark, but you had like 8 of them. And if you hit the big button under the digital crown, you would be able to scroll through those and do them. But it just was really a launcher more than anything else. The new system is superior. I'm convinced. I think people are going to like it. You can have any watch face you want on. If you start scrolling the scroll wheel, it brings up little tiny widgets for various apps, and they're surfaced with artificial intelligence. So if you have a timer running, the timer is going to be the first widget that shows up. At least that's been my experience. If you've got upcoming appointments, those will show up as well very early in the process. But as you scroll down, you get less time-sensitive information like weather or whatever. You can also long press on those when you've got it exposed, and you can customize it. You can say, I don't want to see the weather anymore, or I want the meditation app to come up every time I do this. And you can add them. And granted, we're only working with the Apple widgets this early in the game,
right?
But I've been able to customize it, and I've been able to access that information. Now, you do have to go an extra step for it. But I've always had trouble with the complications. I'm at a weird stage in my eyeballs because I can see 2020 now. Like my reading vision got so bad that that's adjusted the lens in my eyes that I actually see 2020 for distance. And the great thing about that is I don't need to wear glasses like when I drive and stuff, where I used to wear progressives. But now I don't have the progressives on all the time. So I look at the widgets and if I don't have the glasses on, I got problems. But this, this kind of solves that because you can read those things really easy. When you when you scroll the digital crown, it also gives you a digital time, the date, and the date of the month. I'm sorry, not digital time, an analog, a tiny analog clock. As far as I can tell, you can't adjust whether it's analog or digital, but it does give you the day of the week, the month, and the day of the month, and a little analog clock that takes the top half of the screen, and then the widgets scroll underneath that. And it's just really nice. So with just a very quick scroll, you can get into that stuff. Like as I'm doing mine right now, I've got a very busy day. I've got several podcasts and some other meetings planned, and it's giving me a list of those before it's giving me weather. It's not just the next appointment, it's giving me the next 3 appointments because they're all happening pretty quickly. And I've been able to really just kind of customize this to work for me, and I think people will find that as well. The other payoff of this is you can now choose a face that isn't as information dense. Like I often use that information face modular. It was modular digital or something like that, where it would show the big time, the big next appointment, and all that stuff, because that's the only one where I could get all that information. Now you can get it with just a single scroll. So that frees you up. If you prefer an analog face or something a little more whimsical, you still have access to a lot of information on your watch. So I think this was a smart move.
It's interesting how they've had the same two physical controls on the watch from the beginning, but they keep changing what they do. I mean, a long time ago, you hit the side button and you had like your circle of friends, and then it was the dock, and we had glances. They keep trying different things, but I'm really excited about this. And I've never run a watchOS beta, but this is the first year where I'm really, really tempted by it.
Well, I have had no errors, no random restarts. It's been totally stable for me, but the battery does not last as long. If you've got an Ultra, I get a day on it fine. I sleep with my watch on, so I'm used to charging it in the middle of the day anyway, and it still charges just as fast as it did, so you're good. If you've got a few charges around. Now, if you're on the road a lot and you don't have a lot of ways to charge it and you need your watch, I would not install it, but otherwise I think you're probably fine. And honestly, the other thing is it still just tweaks me that these faces aren't good enough. I feel like Apple could do better on these faces. And now that I have the freedom to use any face I want, I really feel like looking at them all that there could be more. I keep landing back on utility, the one I used with the very first Apple Watch. It's like they peaked at Series 0 with the faces.
It's the best watch face they've ever done.
Yeah, it's like, come on, man. What do you use for your watch face currently?
I am a modular or modular compact person. So again, data dense, data rich. My favorite one, though, it's an old one. It's called Solar Graph.
Yeah.
And it's just the sun through the sky as the day goes on.
Yeah.
That's my, I'm going out for dinner or something. I don't need to see a bunch of stuff. And you get I think one complication spot. You get two. So I have the date and the weather at the bottom. And I think that one can make a real comeback for me because all the other stuff would just be a turn of the digital crown away.
Yeah, and you could just turn off the weather widget to make it cleaner and just have the date and the time and the solar position. And then it's just, like you said, a turn of the wheel. It is very nice, and I'm glad to see that. I hope third-party app developers are able to get in on it. I'd love to see some of my favorite apps get into that scrolling list. And I've said this in the prior show that this is the return of the Siri face, and it really is, but it's better. It gives you freedom to choose whatever watch face you want. And the mere act of spinning one wheel, that's totally fine.
This episode of MPU is made possible by SaneBox. SaneBox learns what email is important to you and filters out what isn't, saving you hours of work each week. Learn more and check it out at sanebox.com/MPU. One of my favorite things about SaneBox is that it works with a wide variety of email programs and services. So if you're like me and you use MindStream on the Mac and Mail on iOS and iPadOS, you don't have to go in there and fiddle with things. I'm not running a special SaneBox app. It works directly with my email service, Gmail in my case, but also works with a bunch of others. So as you go out on your email vision quest, SaneBox is with you all the time. SaneBox comes with some really great email filtering out of the box. You can set these tools up in different ways, and you can adjust a bunch of parameters. But some of the kind of famous examples are Sane Later and Sane Black Hole. Sane Later looks at what comes in, and if it's not important to you right now, it just stashes it in the Sane Later folder, and you can get to it on your own time. Sane Black Hole lets you unsubscribe from emails with a single click. Just drag a message into the Sane Black Hole folder and you'll never hear from the sender again. My wife is a big fan of Sane News. She gets a bunch of email newsletters and that sort of thing, and they all filter into that folder, and then on the weekend she can pick up her iPad and go through them at her own pace without them cluttering up her inbox during the week. Of course, you can use snoozes and reminders with SaneBox, and a relatively new feature is called Deep Clean. This lets you clean out and clear out old, unnecessary emails. We've all probably used our email accounts for a long time. I've got tons of stuff in mine that I probably don't need. And SaneBox Deep Clean goes through there. It will look at things based on a date range that you select, which is really cool. And using its artificial intelligence and its great tools, contacts, newsletters, stores, websites, all those things that send you emails, you can get rid of them really easily. It is a really cool feature. You can also move attachments to things like Dropbox or other cloud services. SaneBox has various pricing plans starting as low as about $4 a month. There's a 14-day free trial waiting for you at sanebox.com/MPU. There you will also receive a $25 credit on any plan. And I bet you're going to love SaneBox because 66% of MPU listeners who have tried it over the years end up subscribing. I could not deal with my email without SaneBox. Go to sanebox.com/MPU for a 14-day free trial and a $25 credit on any plan. Our thanks to SaneBox for supporting the show.
All right, I want to talk about the new Mac Pro. I know both of our thoughts on this are a little complicated, and we didn't have that much time in our last show to kind of dig in, so let's do that.
Okay.
So the new Mac Pro looks like the old Mac Pro. That one is always going to be special in my heart. You and I got invited to the keynote of that one. Mm-hmm. And what do they call that? It's not the cheese grater. It's the holy one. I don't know.
It didn't have a great name. The holy one is funny.
Yeah, the holy one. Yeah, let's just see if we can start that. It's the holy one. But either way, it was very expandable, and it was Intel based, and they've been talking about replacing it for some time. But this new one has some features that didn't have, and it doesn't have some features the 2019 one. Let's break down kind of what we got and what we lost.
Yeah, let's start with the things that we got, and I think the biggest thing for the type of people who look at the Mac Pro is much faster media encode and decode. So in that 2019 machine, which I ran for a couple of years as my desktop Mac, and I adored it, you could get an Afterburner card. I think it was like $2,000, and it was a card specifically built for encoding and decoding ProRes video. With Apple Silicon, Apple has moved a lot of that encode decode logic and power into the system on a chip itself, where basically, I don't know if this is actually true, but like the M1 MacBook Air could encode decode just as much as the Afterburner Mac Pro. Right? It very quickly put the Mac Pro and Afterburner in the back seat. And with the M2 Ultra in the Mac Pro, it's like having 7 Afterburner cards. It's like having a Mac Pro full of Afterburner cards. And so if you were doing video ingest or editing or re-encoding to and from ProRes, this is going to be ridiculous. Now, we're going to get to this in a second. I'm going to table the Mac Studio for a minute, but it is the same as the M2 Ultra Mac Studio. But in terms of 2019 to 2023 Mac Pro, I think the media encode decode is the story in terms of performance.
Yeah, all the Apple Silicon wins are magnified on this computer. I mean, the stuff we get, like the way they were able to really dial in Final Cut to do stuff for you, that you get that plus more, just more of it with this computer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other big win over the 2019 is is it the wheels fit? I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Like, no, I'm just kidding. The wheels do fit. You can interchange them. So if you have wheels and you want them on your new one, you can do it. And we joke at the wheels.
$400.
Yeah, we joke at the wheels, but like for some use cases, it is kind of a big deal to slide these things around. In fact, I rewatched the keynote this morning, or I skimmed it, and in the Mac Pro section, they were talking about it was some person in a studio doing amazing high end things, and they had the rack mounted Mac Pro under their desk. And I only noticed because the handle was facing the wrong way from the desktop form factor. I was like, What are we doing? Like, you bought a rack mount Mac Pro and it's on its side. Anyways, that guy needs wheels. Most people don't. But of course, the story with the Mac Pro is the internal expansion, right? That you can put in a bunch of PCI, now Gen 4 cards. It seems like the whole MPX module thing, which was a PCI card plus like an internal Thunderbolt connector, so you can have lots of power going to these cards. All of that seems like it's gone, and they're just moving straight up to Gen 4 PCI. But of course, that's great if you have a bunch of audio or video ingest cards. A lot of Pro Workstation software will have special hardware that goes along with it. Of course, you can stuff it full of storage. My old one, I had a PCI card with SSDs on it. You can do that as well. But you're not putting upgradable graphics in this machine. And I think that is the biggest loser from the 2019 machine to now, is that you are going to be using the GPUs on the M2 Ultra, and you're going to use the number of cores you get when you order it on day one. You can't upgrade it. You can't put another GPU in there for gaming or for machine learning training on models or other computational tasks. And that's a big change from the previous one. It's actually very much in line with the 2013 Mac Pro, where those GPUs were basically what you got, and Apple never did anything past that. And that's a bummer if you're in that sort of market.
Yeah, and I think we need to put perspective on it, though, because the existing GPU performance with Apple Silicon is pretty great.
It is good.
And if you are even a pro user, I would consider myself a pro user, but not the kind of, for a, how do you say, normal pro user? But if you're not the upper end pro user, you're probably going to be fine with this Ultra chip. And
totally.
It's a whole different experience. I mean, historically, shared memory for graphics and processing was bad, right? But because everything is on the same die, it's really fast. Somebody was telling me, they're like, it's the difference between, like, when you have a fire in the old days, they'd have like 5 people that passed the bucket of water from each other before they got the water to the fire. And now you've got a hose that just sprays the water. That's kind of like the difference. And I thought that was kind of a nice analogy. But it's just because of that, the integrated nature of it, that the on-die memory and that you're getting currently is way more efficient and fast than a historical. If you put a graphics card of the same amount in, it would not work as well. But there's no doubt that you could put 4 of those graphics cards in, and you could really throw a lot of compute power at a problem. Like, and I was asking when I was up in San Francisco, like, what are the kinds of uses for this? And like training AI models was one of them. High-end gaming, which so there are certain things for which this computer really probably isn't the answer, right? It's just not going to do that for you. And I don't think it's Apple being vindictive. I just think the architecture of Apple Silicon doesn't really allow you to address a third party video card. I mean, that was always the question that we
Yeah.
would ask in prior years leading up to this. Like, how are they going to deal with the card problem? Well, the answer is they dealt with the card problem with the easy part. Like, if you're making a digital audio workstation, if you're a musician, if you need really fast input and output from your Mac and things that those cards exist for. And there are people that use very, very expensive DAW cards that are going to be very happy with this, right? They're going to drop them in, they're going to get back to work. But there are people who use very, very expensive video cards who are not going to be, because they didn't really have an answer. And I don't know, what that means in the future. Like, there's a thing, an idea that's been kicking around since Apple Silicon started, where there were a bunch of leaks where they just kept kind of doubling the processor at each generation. Like, if you look at the Mac Mini, MacBook Air, it's got the M2 chip in it, right? And that's the base unit of compute for an Apple Silicon chip, right? And then they've got, in some of them, an upgraded M1 Pro, right? And what that is you take two of the basic unit and you glue them together, and now you've got 2x. It doesn't really compute out to 2x because complicated things, but it's double the processor. And then the next level up is you can get a Max chip. I have a Max in my MacBook Pro, and that is taking the Pro chip and doubling that. So it or 4 times the original processor in the M2 chip. So, like, you took the MacBook Air thing, you multiply times 4, you've got a Max chip, right? And then they've got the Ultra, which is doubling a Max chip. So it's 8 times the power of the basic compute unit in the MacBook Air or Mac Mini. Well, there's been a long time rumor that there is also something else. I don't know what they were going to call it, but it was a 16 times. It was taking the Ultra and doubling that. And the rumors were very accurate up until that point. We never did get that double Ultra chip. And the rumors were Apple had a hard time making that, and they gave up on it, or they decided not to make it for the M2. Well, if that is true, if there's a 16 times version of this, and maybe it shows up in the M3 or the M4 generation, and they put that in this Mac Pro, then this conversation would be a lot easier. Be like, oh, okay, so you pay more, you get double an Ultra Mac Studio, you still have the graphics card problem, but you just doubled the graphics cards over an Ultra, which is a heck of a lot of graphics anyway. And I think that makes more sense. And the question that all of us outside of Apple are asking ourselves is this the actual Mac Pro, or is this the kind of compromised version with the Ultra chip in it because they couldn't get that super chip to work in this generation?
Yeah, unknown. And I think time will tell a little bit. It may be that we never see anything above the Ultra. In my brain, I've just called it the Extreme because I kind of, my mind is like the 90s, like big X logo, like Extreme.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that would ever surface, but it does mean that the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro have the same performance. Apple has reiterated that to the press, that these two machines have the same performance. They are the same system on a chip. If you need PCI slots, it's going to cost you $3,000 more to get the Mac Pro.
Yeah, wow.
And if you don't, the Mac Studio is a perfectly capable, and from the reviews that have come out this past week, very solid and very quiet, quieter than the first one, machine. And I think a lot of people who ended up with a Mac Pro in the past, the Mac Studio is the answer now. And I don't think that's a bad thing. We can debate if Apple's leaving money on the table by not having GPU support and higher RAM ceilings and stuff. But the reality is that's a very, very small part of the market. Now, if you're in that part of the market, it stinks. And I'm sorry. And I'm sure Apple is too. But it is, it's just the nature of Apple Silicon that this is where things are. But as far as the future of the Mac Pro, of what comes next, look, people have worried about the Mac Pro since the first day the first one came out, right? The Mac Pro and people who worry about the Mac Pro are like peanut butter and jelly. And so who knows what will happen? But for now, if you need a Mac with PCI slots, you still have a solution. And my guess is that most people, if you took, PCI cards versus GPU versus RAM sealing, like having PCI slots for those capture cards and things, like that's a pretty big portion of that market. I think those people will be well served by this machine. So I'm glad it's here, even though it is a little bit different than previously. I think it's encouraging that Apple clearly is still invested in this market. This machine just didn't happen, right? They spent money to do this. Getting PCI expansion into Apple Silicon is only for this computer, right? They want it didn't just happen, right? It's not like, they laid out the first the first M2 chip and like, oh, look, PCI slots can happen, right? They engineered it to do this. And from that perspective, I'm encouraged that this machine is still around.
Yeah. A couple observations I would have is, first of all, what Steven said is the Ultra in particular, the Mac Studio, is the computer that so many people that would historically buy a Mac Pro, that's enough for them. That's why the Mac Pro is now a niche of a niche, or a niche of a niche. I never know how you pronounce that word.
Yeah, but no one knows.
Yeah, but it is like, I mean, you really need to have those multi-$1,000 capture cards and stuff to need it. Now, the thing Apple did is they didn't solve the problem of the video card on the Apple Silicon. And that is not an easy problem to solve. And I'm not sure, I don't care personally, but I know that there are people out there that do care. But I'm just not sure that is a problem that is easily solved at all. And if you had to choose between what we get from Apple Silicon, which is, let's just step back. People buying a Mac Mini and a MacBook Air now have a computer that had historically the power of a fully loaded MacBook Pro. That's what you get. I mean, as soon as they released we made this massive jump in performance at the low end. And that is the vast, vast majority of people using Apple Mac computers. So you got this massive improvement for all those people at possibly the expense of not having video cards at the upper end. I would make that trade every day. I'm just saying, I mean, if I was if I had Tim Cook's job, I'd say that's a no-brainer. I'd like, do your best, and I do think, I feel in my guts that 16X chip is out there, that Apple is so good at this stuff. Maybe they couldn't make it at the M2, but I feel like at the M3, they're going to do everything they can, because I don't think they like the story either. Like, they don't want people saying the Mac Pro has the same power as a loaded Mac Studio. They want to say the Mac Pro is the biggest, baddest computer on the planet. I feel like they're going to figure it out. I think they set this up. The reason it costs more money and everything is because they don't want to change their price later. But I feel like a year or two from now, this isn't going to happen overnight. There is going to be that 16X version of the chip, whatever they call it. Maybe that'll be called the Extreme. And I think that this will make more sense then. But I don't know that they'll ever get video card support, because I'm just not sure if it's possible and if it's worth it. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. Why don't you give the gift of secure internet to a friend or family member with 1Password? Go to onepassword.com/MPU and you get a nice 20% discount to get started. I recently had a close family friend who finds herself now alone without support, and she needs to manage her own finances and generally her life on the internet. Well, she never had any help with that before, and this was really frustrating her and making her kind of scared, frankly. And so I decided to help her out by sharing 1Password with her. We spent some time together. We got an account set up, and very quickly you could see the confidence she was getting, because suddenly she had an easy way to develop strong and unique passwords. She has access to them on her iPhone. She works on a PC. She can get them off her PC too. I showed her secure notes so she can go in and put information in it she doesn't want anybody else to see. And by the end of just an hour with her, it seems like we completely solved that one problem she was dealing with. And I felt really like I helped her out. And I think you can too. 1Password is the application that does allow your friends and family to become secure on the internet, regardless of their technical level. Even if it's somebody who isn't super nerdy, 1Password has an app so you can go find everything. They've got a ton of cool features like those secure notes and the ability to watch websites for you. Like one of the things I told her about was Watchtower. 1Password Watchtower keeps an eye on the websites that she works with. So if any of the websites she deals with gets hacked, she'll get a note so she can deal with it. And that just really brought her a lot of comfort. You're a Mac Power user listening to this show. You're very good at this kind of stuff, but there's a lot of people in your life that probably aren't. And those are the ones who are most at risk. I really recommend 1Password to help out your friends and family members. Go help somebody out today. And I can tell you, after we finished that hour meeting, she was really thankful. And I felt really great that I'd helped her become more secure on the internet. Now, if you go check it out at onepassword.com/MPU, you get a nice 20% discount. That makes us look great, saves you a few bucks. So do that. Once again, onepassword.com/MPU, and go help somebody out and make them more secure on the internet with 1Password.
So over the last couple of years, we've talked a lot about Apple's suite of productivity apps and how they've been moving the ball forward on those year over year. And so I thought we should look at those, just a handful of their apps in this category, and see what they got this year with iOS and iPadOS 17 and macOS Sonoma. And I want to start with Notes, and I want to talk to you specifically about the inner app linking. So now in the new version of Notes, you can select some text or you can insert a link to not only a web page or an email, kind of a regular URL, which you've been able to do forever, but now you can link to another note. And they've even done this cool shortcut where if you do type 2 greater than signs, you get a little pop-up of your the 6 most recently modified notes. And of course, you can search for any of them and add them there. I know this is a big thing when it comes to these sort of PKM apps, Obsidian, Craft, Roam Research, Notion. A bunch of these tools have functions like this. And I wonder, do you think Apple's done enough here and kind of how it stacks up against the competition?
I don't think they're trying to make Roam Research, notes into Roam Research.
I don't want them to. They don't need to.
Yeah. And so I think this is a great first step. I hope it's not the final step, but the implementation, I have a little issue with. The greater than sign, I think, is the wrong symbol to use for that. I would prefer that it was the @ symbol or 2 open brackets, which basically every other app uses some version of that. So to kind of keep it consistent. But I also can see Apple saying, well, we're going to do it our way and we want to use greater than, so we will. But I've been using it and it's a one direction link. So you create the link and it jumps to the other note. There's no backlinks listed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's fine. I'm a little surprised it's here. Honestly, I thought eventually Notes would get something like this because it's happening. And we've talked on the show this idea of linked notes and how powerful of an idea it can be. But it's good that it's here. It's kind of an Apple implementation. It's nice and sweet, not super powerful, but it's there. And like if you have a note that you want to link to other notes, it's quite useful.
Yeah, I think they've done enough for the everyday user, right? Where, I'm traveling and I want to link to my note with my TSA pre-information in it, or the note with my passport number in it, or something like that. I could see them at some point maybe automating backlinks down the road, because it is nice to be able to go the other way and like see what else is linking here. But I don't think it's necessary for a tool like Notes. That feels like a pretty clean break of, hey, if you do need this, there are a bunch of other apps out there that do it.
Yeah, and I think the context of all the Apple apps is each one of them, even though they're getting better, and we've been talking about it now for a while on the show, all of these apps, there are better versions of this stuff. If you want to get a more power version of any of these, they're out there, right? But what Apple is doing, in my opinion, is not shooting for the top. They're not trying to knock out OmniFocus with reminders or take on, PDF Expert with the PDF tools. But what they are doing is raising the floor. And historically, their apps have been really kind of anemic with some of these things that people need to do every day. And now they're like really taking it seriously. And so the app that you get when you buy the device that's free, that comes from Apple, has most of the tools that most people need. And I think the apps that are threatened by this are not the upper end apps, but the mid tier and low tier apps, because Apple does a good job. And like, okay, I want to do a little basic linking. Well, it's here. I don't need to go find an app to do that now. They've got it covered.
Yep.
And the same applies for the PDF support. Like the PDF stuff in Notes is nice. Like I have used Notes for PDFs for a while now because I've really tried to use Notes as kind of my personal database. Because of what I do for a living, I try to use kind of all the tools, and I've found different buckets of my life that fit into different ones, and that way I'm in them every day and I can talk about them. But just as an example, when I buy a new tool, I always download the PDF, manual for it, and I keep that stuff in Notes. And I had this collection of PDFs, but it was always a pain in the neck. You had to click on it; it would open the note in a different application. The whole thing felt clunky.
Yeah, it did.
And now it's not that. Now you can view the PDF right in the app. Now you could also do that in DevonThink, but DevonThink does like a million other things too.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they're knocking out DevonThink with this feature, but for people who just want to put some PDFs in their Notes, now they made life a little better.
Yeah, I think the PDF thing was definitely low hanging fruit in Notes for all the reasons you said. One thing I didn't see coming, but I'm really interested in, is being able to send the content of an Apple Note into Pages. I think a lot of people, including me for sure, Notes can be like a scratch pad for lots of things. And maybe I'm working on like language or text for a flyer or something's going to be a graphic or something. Now you can basically take that and move it and kind of sort of graduate it up to Pages. I'm very curious how they came to this feature. Like, is this something that people are doing? I mean, I would always just use copy and paste, to go into whatever app the text was going to go into. But it is interesting. And I do wonder if there are going to be other things like this in the future, either in Notes or in other applications, not necessarily upgrading to Pages, but take this piece of content and send it over somewhere else. We see a lot of that in applications like Drafts, right? Immediately comes to mind. But this is an interesting direction for the Notes team to take. I'm curious where they go with it.
Well, I feel like this app is hitting us in what I would call a nerd blindside, because we have figured out how we want to write with powerful tools, Scrivener, Drafts, IA Writer. Everybody listening to this show has some precious app they use to make good words in. And I would argue that very few people that listen to Mac Power users think, oh, Apple Notes, that's where I write notes, I think for people who don't listen to Mac Power users, that Apple Notes is the thing. Even on social media, like every time a celebrity, steps in it, they publish a picture of an Apple Note where they write their apology. Have you ever seen that? Like it's always an Apple Note. And I think a lot of people write in Apple Notes, and Apple's like, well, hey, if they're writing in Apple Notes, maybe they want to turn their apology into a pretty document. So give them the ability to put it in Pages,
I won't dox who this is, but a high profile tech writer who everyone would know. I was spending, I saw them last week in the Apple Visitor Center. They blocked off part of it for media, and they were writing a long post in Apple Notes. It's like, I don't know this person super well. Like, I don't want to say who it is, but I was like, oh, look at that, right? Like everyone uses Notes. And so being able to take that content elsewhere easier, it's going to be a win for a lot of people.
Yeah, and honestly, what's wrong with that? I mean, Apple Notes is good.
Nothing.
And they've got some great widgets now. There's a lot of reasons like it. I personally prefer Drafts because the tool set, Drafts it does a whole bunch of stuff for me that Notes can't do. But to each his own. And I feel like for most people, writing in Notes is going to be, they're already doing it. So why not combine two things Apple makes? And this puts more people in Pages too. But I don't know. It makes sense to me, but it caught me on my nerd blind side because I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. And I got thinking, oh, you know what? That probably makes total sense. It's like, it makes me wonder, well, what else are people doing that I don't think about because I've already moved on to more powerful tools?
Sure. Yeah. And it's one of those things where like, I think it's important for us, the two of, specifically you and me, to spend time in reminders and notes and freeform and stuff, because most people use the built-in stuff. And it means that for the vast majority of people who take notes on their Apple devices, this will be the first time they ever think about or see, oh, I can link one note to another, right? Like
Yeah.
these features are common in the tools that we use and talk about. But for the vast majority of Apple's customers, anything new in these apps is probably new to them for the first time.
And often for software developers that are making more powerful linking apps, this is great for them because it's almost kind of I hate to use the term gateway drug, but it's a feature that people get exposed to in the Apple app, and they're like, "Hey, I kind of like this linking thing. Is there a way I could do more of it?" And that leads them down a road to a more powerful app that does more powerful linking stuff.
Totally.
Let's talk about PDFs. In addition to embedding PDFs in notes, they've also added basic fill-in details with PDFs where you can fill them in and use artificial intelligence where it will determine a field name and fill it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to someone at WWDC about this because for a while now you've been able to scan a PDF into notes, right? And of course, there are lots of third-party apps that let you just scan directly to Dropbox or iCloud Drive or things like that. But those forms, like those PDFs that are forms, they're not as useful as ones that have been digital their whole lives because the form information gets preserved, right? So your school, so I'm dealing with it right now. My insurance agent sent me a PDF form I need to fill out and get back to her. And I opened it in preview and all the forms are there, right? So I can click in and type my name, type my address, hit a couple of radio boxes or whatever I need to do. But if she had mailed me that and I scanned it with my phone or with my flatbed scanner, don't have that, right?
Yeah.
And what I would do, because I'm me, I would go into preview and draw little text boxes and write my name and try to line it up. And what this promises is that those PDFs that don't have that form field, either because you scanned them or because someone saved it as a PDF without form fields, they get all those same really useful tools. And I'm all for it. I know you wrote a paperless book a long time ago, but you and I both really believe in that. I try to scan everything and get rid of the paper that I don't need. And this is going to make that whole world, I think, a lot easier and better to deal with.
Well, I also think that it's interesting because it is where Apple has a basic tool that can beat more powerful tools because of Apple's advantage. It is an Apple app. It has access to your entire system, your personal data and whatnot. And that makes it the friction point lower for the application to say, well, it's asking for his name. I know his name. I'll put it in. It's asking for his address. I know his address. And it seems so natural that the computer can do this for us. And I hope that I haven't tested this yet, so we'll report back when we get closer to release. But I hope this works as easy as they say it will. And if it does, that'll just make everybody's lives so much easier.
Yeah.
Let's talk about reminders. I felt like the reminders update this year wasn't as ambitious as I would have liked to seen it. But there are a couple of cool features. One is grocery list. If you turn any list into a grocery list, it will automatically categorize all the items on it. And we happen to share a grocery list, Daisy and I. So I just did that, and it was spot on. The carrots were in the produce, and everything was where it belonged, and that's great. That's a nice little feature. Again, I'm going to say quality of life, but not game changing. I feel like if there was a list of things I want reminders to do, automatically creating a grocery list would not be very high on it. But for a lot of people, this will be useful.
I think a lot of households use reminders for a shared grocery list. One neat feature in there is if it miscategorizes something and you change it, it will remember your change. So maybe you have something that you purchase at the grocery store that it doesn't know about for some reason, or it just puts in the wrong place. I think that's pretty sweet. I mean, just last night, I went to the grocery store and we had a bunch of things in our grocery list. And of course, like we talked about on a recent episode, I'm sort of bouncing off the outside walls of the grocery store, trying to find everything in order, but it's out of order. So I agree with you. It's not as ambitious as I wanted, but I'm pumped about the grocery sorting.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm more excited about, and I really didn't see coming, is column view. So they've made a way to organize tasks by a column view, which is, if anybody's familiar with the idea of a Kanban board, it's in essence creating a Kanban board and a reminders list. And I like that. I am experimenting with it because when you combine this feature with the easy nature of sharing a reminders list, this might be something that I put in place in production, where I've got a list of things I'm working on with the people I work with, and we could have a Kanban board just showing where everything is. I've been looking at options for that. There are obviously several good websites that do it. There's some apps that do it, but for what I'm looking at, reminders might actually be one of the better options if it pays off. But I'm kind of early in my testing of it, but I didn't see that coming. That was kind of a nice feature.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
I know that you tried to make reminders your thing last year and ultimately gave up on it, but I forgot why. What was it that chased you out?
It was really on the Mac that everything required a lot of clicking around, and that in the inspector, and this is silly, but task managers are finicky and people who use them are finicky, that I couldn't easily move a task in between lists from the inspector that had to drag and drop stuff around. I will be giving it another run later this year for sure, because I'd like to be able to use it because the Siri support is so good.
Well, now if you click on the inspector for a task, you can change the list.
Yes. Thank you, reminders team.
Yeah. So they heard you.
That's awesome. Hey, last year I got my feature right where the app badge would match the today view in the app. And I was so pleased about that because before reminder just didn't work for me because I want those numbers to be the same. But I am definitely going to be giving this a shot. Now, I know there are some features that a lot of people like defer dates that it doesn't support, and who knows if it ever will. I mean, even Todoist is just now, they're going to add defer dates later this year. And, they're a higher end tool than reminders. So I don't know if that'll ever make its way down, but for, again, the vast majority of people, their task manager is going to get a nice update this fall.
Okay, so as you were talking, I was looking, and while you can move a reminder to a different list on the phone, I'm not seeing that on the Mac. So you may.
No. Yeah. Well, I will file feedback for the reminders team then.
We are in beta 1. There's still time. Yeah. I really like defer dates, and OmniFocus is far superior to reminders for a bunch of reasons. But every year when we're in this beta season, I really spend a lot of time with the Apple apps. I'm currently running my tasks simultaneously in OmniFocus and reminders just to see kind of what's going on. I really want to be able to tell people where the line is. And every year the line gets closer. Reminders creeps up more, but they're not near OmniFocus, which is my opinion is the premier task manager. But reminders creeps up, and there are I feel like it's better at sharing than OmniFocus, and it has now this Kanban view. So there's certain things about it I think I'm going to probably keep using permanently, but I'm in the midst of kind of evaluating them now. It's very early in the process, but yeah, it got a little better. I was hoping it would get even more better this year. Mm-hmm. Is that a word? Even more better? But yeah, it seemed like a little, they've been going so hard the last few years. I kind of like that cadence. I want more. We always want more, Stephen.
It's true.
Speaking of more, Freeform got more.
Yeah, it did. This sort of answers the question we had a while back: is Freeform on its own trajectory, or is it tied to OS releases like Mail and Safari? And it seems like it's the latter. A bunch of new drawing tools coming to Freeform. So there's a watercolor brush, a calligraphy pen, a highlighter. There's a pen where you can set a variable width and a ruler. So some additional drawing tools. I felt like what was there worked for me, but I'm not the drawing type really. Most of the stuff I do in apps like Freeform are kind of structured tree kind of things. But if you wanted those, they're there. And something I think is really cool is shape recognition. So if you draw a triangle or a square or a circle with the pencil, it will snap it into a perfect version of that shape.
Yeah. I mean, just little improvements. And the thing I have noticed is the word Freeform keeps coming up in relation to, the new hardware. So,
yes.
Vision Pro and Freeform are intertwined in the the public messaging from Apple, which explains why this app exists. I mean, we actually questioned it when we did the show. Like, it's kind of weird that they made this app, but now it's like, oh, I get it. What if you were wearing a headset and you wanted to think through an idea? You would need an app to do that. So Apple has one.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the more I think about the Vision Pro and doing some visual thinking, like putting that thing on and having a 8-foot wide whiteboard that I could work on, that is one of the use cases that is very attractive to me. So I hope Freeform continues to get more features.
Yeah, it definitely was made and designed with the Vision Pro in mind, I think.
Yeah. Safari, more productive?
Yeah, Safari got some stuff that I think is really cool from the perspective of a Chrome user. One of the best things in Google Chrome is multiple profiles. So these are basically instances of your browser that have their own history, extensions, bookmarks, cookies. And so I've got my personal one, and then I have one that's logged into like a Relay FM account that does very specific things with Google, or I have one that's logged into my YouTube account for the 512 channel. And this is coming to Safari now, which is really awesome. I think a lot of people use Chrome because of this. So they can have a personal and a work profile, and they're kind of their own worlds, and you can run them both at the same time in different windows. And it seems like Safari is getting all of that this year.
Yeah, nice.
Very good.
Nice. I feel like the whole passkey thing is the penny hasn't fully dropped on it. Like, they announced it last year. We got more features for it this year. 1Password now has their program out. Everybody's like getting on board with passkeys, but it hasn't really reached that critical mass yet. One of the things we really need is buy-in from the vendors. We need the people that are making websites that you log into to get invested in passkeys and changing their sites for that. That costs money and time and risk for them because it's a password-related thing. I feel like a year from now, we're going to be in a much better spot with passkey and password, but I'm happy to see Apple continuing to push that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think a lot of people, including me, honestly, don't have our heads fully wrapped around passkeys. I mean, that's really brand new. Like, it's in beta in 1Password, who's a sponsor, and beta in some other services. So I think there's more to this, to come. And I think we will revisit passkeys maybe later this year once they're maybe a bit more out in the world, because they are kind of complicated to understand in some ways.
They are, and they're also kind of simple, but you need to see them working to really grok it. But yeah, we will have more content for you on that, but there's nowhere to go right now. There's not much to do with it yet, but once the information is useful to you, we will do a show on it, because I am interested and I'm following it. Mail, again, a big question this year. Are we going to get like the kind of improvements we got on Mail last year? Is Mail now on the annual upgrade cycle, or was last year kind of a fluke? Well, the answer to that question is a little mixed. There is some improvements to Mail, but it's really not like last year.
Yeah. Last year was the sort of the big year for Mail. In fact, some things are going away. So the old Mail plugin architecture, they shifted gears a while back to a new, more secure plugin system for Mail. And the old ones are going to be going away with macOS Sonoma. So they were deprecated back in Monterey. And we have a link from our friend Adam, who was on the show a little while ago. He runs Message Filer and some other things for Mail. And they are unfortunately gone now. So if you are relying on the more traditional Mail plugins, you're going to need to find another solution when Sonoma comes around.
Yeah, and this is not a surprise. I mean, no. Adam and everybody doing this knew this was coming. And honestly, this needed to happen, because I don't want the Mail application becoming a vector for someone hacking my Mac.
Yep.
And so that's all okay. What's disappointing is the new improvements. So it will try to find your travel emails to put it at the top of your search results. That's cool. So it's using a little bit of artificial intelligence to say, oh, you've got a trip coming up and that's in a week. If you search your mail, I'm going to try and weight that heavier so it shows up, so you get to it faster. There's nothing more. I've been in that spot where you're like at the desk at the airport, and you need to get like something that got emailed to you, and you're like looking through email, and everybody behind you is looking at you like you're a jerk. I get that, but that's a nice little feature. And then you can add big emoji to your messages. Great.
Hey.
That's great. But you know what you can't add to your messages? Memoji. I don't understand that. Those Memoji stickers.
Oh, yeah.
I like them. I use them in my messages. But I also like to use them in email replies. Sometimes people send me a little message as Max Parkey, and I want to give them a little thumbs up or something that, hey, I got that. Thanks. And I've created, scripts to do it on my Mac, and I had to screenshot them. It's very complicated what I ended up doing, but why can't we just get those in mail replies? Don't know. But I feel like there's a lot of fruit on the tree for Apple Mail, and Mail is evolving. Apple Mail is still a good app, and it's solid. But man, I do wish they would add some more features.
We talked on dictation and Siri some in the episode we recorded at Apple Park, but I did want to touch on, I don't know if, I couldn't remember if we mentioned it, so I put it here, but you can, in iOS 16, use dictation and the keyboard together more than you used to be able to, but you can now like be typing while dictating from Apple's Note. How does this work?
Yeah. Great. The dictation is, I just did a thing for the labs where I dictated like 5 or 6 paragraphs, and there's like 1 or 2 errors. It's so much better. And the thing you can do now that I've never been able to do before with an Apple device is dictate while not looking at the dictation, if that makes sense. So like one of my favorite workflows is if I'm doing something complicated, I will have maybe a mind note or some kind of outline I'm working off of as I'm writing. And I'll be looking at the outline and just talking into the microphone. But historically, I would always have to keep an eye on the Siri dictation because it can go off the rails sometimes. Like it starts to misinterpret, and that kind of compounds on itself. And then suddenly, like there's just madness coming out of my keyboard. And with the new model, that just doesn't happen. So I've been dictating without looking at it, which is not something I would do before this release. So yeah, it's great. It's great. I haven't done a lot of that where I'm typing while I do it. I need to test that further. But yeah, just overall, I'm very happy with the dictation.
I don't think my brain could do that very easily. Typing and talking is hard to do at the same time for some of us. On the Siri front, they've dropped "Hey" from the wake phrase on some devices, not all devices. And I think more importantly, it can now handle multiple back-to-back requests without having to reawaken the assistant. So you could say, "Assistant, tell me the weather and open my blinds." And in the past, that would be 2 different interactions. And so it can keep up with this a little bit better. I've not been able to play with this yet, but if it works, that's going to be fantastic because Siri is very back and forth right now when you have more than one thing you want to get done.
Yeah. But as someone with a daughter named Sarah, I would really like the ability to reprogram that word.
Oh, yeah. And on the Amazon product, they have a couple of phrases. And Apple, we should say, you have an option to leave the "hey" part on or off. But yes, with a Sarah in the house or in the family, I'm sure it is painful sometimes. This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by ZocDoc. When someone is just exceptionally good at what they do, could be a waiter, a chef, or a doctor, you know you're in good hands. It's like seeing a waiter trying to balance 5 trays of sizzling fajitas in one arm. You're confident they can get it done. And when you find the right doctor, you can just feel it. You feel heard and at ease. On ZocDoc, finding the doctor that's right for you is seamless. The quality care you need is just a few taps away in the ZocDoc app. That is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, are available when you need them, and treat almost every condition under the sun. Having the right doctor is a huge thing. Maybe you've moved to a new town, moved across the country for a job or something. You need to find a new physician. Maybe you have something new going on and your old doctor isn't a good fit. Or maybe you're just looking for a change. ZocDoc can take care of you in all of those situations. No more doctor roulette or scouring the internet for questionable reviews. With ZocDoc, you have a trusted guide to connect you to your favorite doctor you haven't met yet. Millions of people use ZocDoc's free app to find and book a doctor in their neighborhood who is patient-reviewed and fits their needs and schedule just right. Go to ZocDoc.com/MPU to download the app for free. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/MPU. There you can find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available with 24 hours. Get the free app at ZocDoc.com/MPU. Our thanks to ZocDoc for their support of the show and Relay FM.
All right, listener feedback. We got some good feedback this month. David wrote in, I just received notice of a massive price hike for Evernote, and I'm going to replace it. I use other apps for notes, but Evernote is my digital junk drawer. I need something that can OCR PDF scans once I upload them, has powerful full-text search for attachments, is web-based so I can access it from iOS and Windows devices. He says, DevonThink is the first thing that came to mind, but I need to be cloud-based. What do you suggest to replace Evernote for my requirements? I would give DevonThink a try, is what I would do, because DevonThink has a mobile app. So it's not cloud-based in the sense that you have a website you can go to, although there is a version of DevonThink, the upper end version where you can share it with people. I guess you could kind of wire that up that way, but that's not really what they intend.
Mm-hmm.
But they've got mobile apps, which I personally know they've been working really hard on kind of like bringing those up. And everything can be cloud-based. You can store it in iCloud, in Dropbox, in your own cloud. So you can have it in the cloud. And in terms of like the power, we already talked about DevonThink today. It's just the best. And I guess the question I'd ask yourself, David, is where are you doing most of this stuff? Where are you accessing your junk drawer? You know, if you're primarily accessing it on your iPhone, if you're primarily accessing it on your Mac, then I think DevonThink is the answer, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
If you're primarily accessing it on iPhone and iPad, I think DevonThink is worth a try because it's just so powerful and you can do all the tagging and searching on their mobile devices. If DevonThink doesn't do it for you, well, I would give it some thought. Because he's got a long list of things he wants. He wants it to do a PDF scan, and he wants it to do full text search of attachments. There's not a lot of options out there that like are primarily mobile.
Mm-hmm.
That have that feature set that's not DevonThink. You can't search attachments in Notes because Notes is definitely trying to take on Evernote.
Mm-hmm.
You got any ideas for a leading contender on iPhone and iPad with that feature set?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about Craft, but Craft doesn't do search and attachments. Yeah. It does like what Notes does now before the update, where PDFs basically just open in preview. And Craft, my number one complaint about it is does not have offline access on mobile, and that kills me with Craft. But I don't know. I mean, I would start with DevonThink. I mean, really, this is kind of the problem with Evernote's long, slow decline is that it does stuff that a lot of other tools don't have all in one place. But I would start with DevonThink.
Yeah, and what I would do, David, is DevonThink I think has a 30-day trial.
It does. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so go in and really try it, and give some thought to where you're doing this work, because when you call it your digital junk drawer, it sounds to me like it's not mission critical stuff. And if you could limit yourself to primarily doing that on your Mac, and then just occasionally when you need on the other devices, DevonThink may be the answer. It definitely solves the problem in terms of power. But when you have and depending on how big your database and stuff is, it does get complicated to sync that over to mobile devices. But I would also ask the listeners, if anybody is doing this primarily on iPhone and iPad and they have something they love, put it into the MPU forums at talk.macpiracy.com. And David, go check in a couple of weeks after the show releases and see if somebody comes up with something better. Maybe we'll cover this in a future feedback show as well. But good question. Kind of stumped me a little bit when you said I wanted to do all that stuff, but I also wanted to work on mobile.
Mm-hmm. Craig wrote in with an interesting one. Craig says, I have about 1,000 contacts, and the problem is that Siri accidentally calls the wrong person. Maybe I didn't speak clearly enough, or background noise was a problem. But when it starts calling the wrong person, I wish there was a way to have a check mark to determine if a contact is Siri accessible. Any ideas on how to prevent the mistake? I would only ever use Siri to call at most maybe 100 of those contacts. I agree, Craig. I think this is a shortcoming in the contacts Siri interface. And I don't really know if there's a way around it. If you need all those people in the contacts app, then Siri has access to all of them. And you can't, as far as I know, and I looked for this before we recorded, as far as I know, you can't tell Siri to ignore or just honor like a group in contacts. Because if it did that, you could have a group that says, Siri, and it could only interact with those. So I agree that this is a frustration. I've definitely had it happen, right? Where I tell, like, especially in the car with CarPlay, hey, call David. And like, I mean, David Sparks, and usually it gets that right. But then sometimes it calls like some random David I went to high school with who I haven't talked to in 20 years. So I agree. It's a little bit frustrating. So I put this in here to not only reiterate his frustration with this, but also point out that nicknames can help with this. So my dad and my brother share a first name. My brother's not a junior. They have different middle names. I don't know why it happened that way. But so my dad has dad as a nickname in his contact card. So I can say call dad and it calls him and not my brother. And that can work around some of these things. But this is sort of an interesting problem that I wish Apple would tackle at some point. I mean, look, we got fancy new voicemail features now. Like clearly they do touch this part of their OSs every once in a while. And like we said on our contacts episode, most people don't ever get rid of contacts. Our contact lists just get bigger and bigger over time.
Yeah, I the nickname thing, I second that. Like if you've only got 100, think if you can come up with contacts for the or nicknames for them. I like Steve and I have the same problem. For years, I had the problem getting back to my Sarah. I hope I'm not triggering a bunch of people's assistant when I say that, but I would ask it to call her, and there was an old client of mine that I hadn't represented in like 10 years, and it would always call that person. And every time I would stop it and then say no, and then I'd push the button for my Sarah. And I was thinking at some point, doesn't this phone get smart enough to realize every time I suggest the one person, he goes to the other one, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it stopped doing that to me. It does the right person. I don't know if that was onboard AI or whatever. In fact, now that I think about it, I think I deleted the client at some point. I was like, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fix, right?
Yeah, so yeah, that's not really very helpful, Craig. But yeah, nicknames. Maybe nicknames can help you. But this is something where Apple could definitely get better.
Yeah.
Peter wrote in on a recent show. I mentioned lack of a Tai Chi workout, and he says it may be a publishing thing, but I have Tai Chi available. What I meant was you can trigger a workout on your watch for Tai Chi, but they don't have in the fitness app. In the Fitness Plus, they don't have Tai Chi videos.
Oh, okay.
I feel like
okay.
I probably misspoke, but I mean, I feel like Apple is a hippie enough company that. And I've been now to their fitness center. There's definitely room to do Tai Chi there. So it's like, it screams out Tai Chi. I mean, we didn't really say it because we were there, but they've got like nice rocks everywhere, water, stone, wood. I mean, if there's one place in the world to do Tai Chi, it's the Apple Fitness Center. So I feel like we should have a video for that.
That's right. And we were in the health and body and mind room or something. They turned into the podcast studio. So people are doing stuff in there right now, probably.
Make a video, gang.
Yeah. What I would like a workout type for is yard work. I was talking with Dan Seifert of The Verge. He's a friend of ours. And over the weekend, I think he had a post on Mastodon, and it was like he just turns outdoor walk on, like Moses grass. Like, there's got to be a better way for this. And lots of people do yard work. I think the activities app or fitness app now, they changed it like 2 years ago, and I never get the name right. It sort of lacks some like everyday type movement things that, like mowing my grass isn't a workout, but my heart rate's up and I'm sweating. And so it's probably good for me. I have an electric mower, so I'm not breathing in a bunch of fumes. So I thought about that when I saw Peter's comment.
Well, I do the same thing because I garden a lot. I pull weeds and I trim trees, and I'm like, that is very much a part of my workout routine is gardening. And I just put other, but I always log the workout because I feel like I want credit for it. And I do sweat and I do really get my heart going. Sit down, stand up, pull weeds, saw tree branches, all that stuff. You're burning calories, so I want to get credit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I use other. There should be like just a gardening one or something like that. I agree. I even do the same because I have a wood shop, but I do a lot of by hand, a hand plane. And you know what? That is a workout, right? You're trying to flatten a board with a piece of steel and and my heart really gets going, and I do the same thing I listed as other, but I'm not expecting Apple to have hand planing as a workout, but
it's very specific.
If they do add it, I will know that they listen. So guys, if you really want to let me know you're listening, just add hand planing.
If you add it, Sparks will make you a beautiful piece of wood for your desk at Apple Park.
I will. I'll make you a little like keyboard rest. That's easy. And I'll hand plane it and I'll log it.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely add activity types over the years. And it started out with a pretty simple list, whenever it was 8 years ago when the Apple Watch first shipped. So they have added a lot of things, but like there's sailing in there. Like, how many people sail with an Apple Watch versus do yard work with an Apple Watch?
Yeah, I feel like that's like a rich man thing, right? It's
yes.
like, oh, I don't need yard work, but I definitely need sailing.
Yeah. What manager at Apple has a sailboat and they were like, you know what? I can do this, so I'm going to do it. Come on, be a man of the people,
Definitely somebody that was there and had stock when Steve came back. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Electric. Go to electric.ai/MPU and unbury yourself from IT tasks and get a free pair of Beats Solo 3 wireless headphones when you schedule a qualifying meeting. When leading your small business, it's not all glamour. In fact, sometimes it's a matter of spending hours onboarding an employee, which you're well equipped to deal with, but maybe you don't have the time. The team over at Electric knows small businesses, maybe like yours, face these challenges. That's why they're on hand to help with the time-consuming parts of your business, like standardized device security with best-in-class device management software, so you can implement best practices across the board and be ready to scale, and employee onboarding and offboarding done for you, saving you an average of 8 hours per request. Plus, Electric helps you keep a single point of visibility into your IT environment to control your devices, networks, and applications. Their simplified reporting allows you to achieve and maintain compliance, and proactive IT recommendations and automated workflows make IT easy to manage for even non-technical users. And look, if you're hearing this and you think your company could use some of these services, but you're not sure where to start, Electric's experts will guide you through the process of establishing standardized IT processes for your organization. I think one of the real tricks of finding IT support when you are technically minded, like you are, dear Mac Power Users listener, is to find an IT company that will work with you hand in hand, and Electric is just that. But even though you understand this stuff, doesn't mean you should be doing all this work. You should be running your business and growing it and letting Electric handle that IT. I've definitely made that mistake too many times in my life of saying, well, I'll just do it. But before you know it, you're turning yourself into IT and the business isn't getting the attention it deserves. If you're looking for IT support from people that get it, you should check out Electric. And for Mac Power Users listeners, Electric is offering a free pair of Beats Solo 3 headphones for taking a qualified meeting. Just go to electric.ai/MPU. That's electric.ai/MPU. Go there now and get your free pair of Beats Solo 3 headphones today just for scheduling a qualified meeting. And our thanks to Electric for their support of the Mac Power Users.
So, David, one thing I wanted to ask you about specifically was the Disney portion of the WWDC keynote, and Chris wrote in as well, wanting to know. So this was in the Vision Pro segment. Bob Iger, the once and current CEO of Disney, came out and talked about some of the things that they're looking at with this product. And as someone who, loves and follows both companies, kind of want to hear what you thought about that.
There was one line he said during his presentation he says, the best storytelling company in the world will combine with the best technology company in the world. And I really liked that categorization because Disney does have some great storytellers and Apple does have some great technology. It didn't surprise me at all. I mean, if you kind of follow the inside baseball version of this, Bob Iger and Steve Jobs were very close friends. Bob Iger was a pallbearer at Steve's funeral. I mean,
wow.
They were close, and really credit Steve as kind of a mentor as he was taking over Disney. So, and also Bob Iger's on the Disney board of directors. So, I mean, there's just a very close connection between these companies. But I do think Vision Pro eventually will be something that will be a great product for the Disney company. It's releasing. And I haven't really got my thoughts clear on this, but I mean, it's releasing as a consumer product, but it's really releasing as a first gen laboratory product too. I mean, at $3,500, it's made for people that are very interested in it or have sailboats, and I think that it's going to be a while before the price gets down with the kind of experience Apple is creating, but it will get down. In fact, I was talking to a friend about it over the weekend and saying, well, what's the long term for this? I said, well, it's going to get cheaper and better, and it's going to be huge, I think, in the long term. It's going to have a negative side. I mean, at some point, you know how you go to the restaurants now and you see the kids on the iPads? It's going to be unbearable in 10 years. They're going to be wearing those stupid goggles, right? Or whatever the version is in 10 years. And then the parents won't be talking to them because they're in virtual space. But there's a lot of positive things about it. And I think a company like Disney is going to take advantage of it as much as possible. The thing that Disney has that a lot of companies don't is the theme park division, which brings in the Imagineers. And they are, just like the name implies, they're engineering people who are creative. And like you're going to give something like this to them, and they're going to come up with so many great ideas. And that's partly the reason Apple's putting this in the world, right? So people like Disney can say, well, what would we do with this? And the people that were fortunate enough to have the test talked about sporting events, like where you can incorporate this in sporting events. Disney owns ESPN. They showed during the keynote watching a Star Wars movie with this big, great screen and everything, but also kind of like in space in like the environment of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And I think Disney's going to be doing stuff like that. I think that they're going to Bob Chapek, the guy in between the two Bob Iger managements. At one point, he talked about this and said, we want to create the park experiences in a virtual space for people who can't get to the parks. We want to give them something that they can do.
Yeah.
And I can totally imagine like ride experiences and whatnot rendered in VR. And this is like the tip of the iceberg. These are the obvious things. What about, enhancing the movie experience more than just create the environment, but have things moving around you? Or I don't know. I mean, I think they're going to really go nuts with it. The Imagineers, if you've been to any of the theme parks lately and seen some of the stuff they've done in more recent attractions, like for instance, the Rise of the Resistance ride at Disneyland, it is a multimedia experience. Mm-hmm. And I think this just gives them one more tool. I could see them incorporating it into stuff at the parks, but I could also see them coming up with content for you at home with stuff like this. So that was a long answer to your question, Chris, but I think it's a very good partnership. And I think with Bob Iger and Tim Cook and the long history between the companies, I think you're going to see some really cool stuff come out of it.
Yeah, I do too. It seems like it's the ultimate second screen experience. I mean, you mentioned Star Wars, but in that sort of the promo reel they played in the keynote, it's like you're watching The Mandalorian and facts about the planet they're on are like floating next to you. And you could pull that up and like see where they are on a map or be in the, cockpit with Mando. Like all of those things, I think are really going to enrichen. That's not a word. Is that a word? You're going to enrich
yeah.
the whole experience. And I think that is really exciting. I think Disney is definitely really well suited to do that, but I think others will come along as well. I mean, I think about Amazon Prime, and they have the X-ray feature. So if you're watching something on Prime, you can see any actor in that scene and tap on them and read about them. Maybe they have trivia about that part of the episode because it refers back to something else or something special about the location. And I think that sort of stuff could really come to life in a new way in this spatial computing interface. Something they showed again in that Disney section was like an NBA game, and you could do a replay and like move the camera around and like see exactly where a player went and see exactly how the pass worked and see the dunk from all these different angles. And I think that's going to be really cool. Now, is that all going to be there on day one? No, like it's going to be a process. In fact, after all of that like hype, then he was like, Disney Plus will be available at launch. It's like, so not the other stuff. Like, you're just bringing your iPad app over. It will take time because someone has to make all this content and then retrofit it to previous, media if they go back in time with it. But I do think Disney is definitely the perfect partner for Apple in this. And I'm sure Apple will do their own stuff with Apple TV Plus as well. But I'm excited about this. And it struck me in rewatching the keynote today. So I rewatched the Mac section and the Vision Pro section in particular. And it's not very often that Apple pitches a device with entertainment being one of the core features, right? Like we all argued 10 years ago about the iPad, about, creation or consumption or whatever. And that's old and boring. But with this, they're just saying like on the tin, like, yeah, part of what this is going to be really good at is entertainment and the immersive nature of it. If you twist that dial and block out your entire world, like it allows for things we can't do anywhere else in this meaningful way. And that is exciting. And I just really noticed it on the rewatch that Apple sort of underlined the entertainment aspect of this.
Thinking about it after the event, I feel like entertainment is going to be the initial success of the product.
Yeah.
It's like that's going to be the thing that sells devices, and that's going to be the thing that immediately works. I'm much more interested into what comes after that, but I do think it's clear that being able to sit on an airplane and watch a movie in big screen, or to do that at home, and some of the other entertainment elements of it, I think that's going to be the easy sell for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And the sports thing is huge. Like, I am not as big of a sports guy as some people, but like I've watched football games, like American football games, and I'm like, boy, wouldn't it be cool if I could just watch that receiver run his pattern from a certain camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And watch that play how I want to see it. Because football, there's so much going on. You only get to see whatever the editor chooses to show you. I feel like that kind of stuff could be very possible and make me feel like I'm there, see the hit close or whatever. And it's going to require people to change the way they cover this stuff and probably camera angles and all sorts of things. But I feel like the desire is there because I think they see money, right? I mean, ESPN is going to be able to sell you a subscription where you can watch baseball and, sit right over the umpire's shoulder. Yeah, why not, right?
Yeah.
And people will pay for that. And especially sports fans, so I think there's just a lot to happen here. And even the way they announced it, they kept saying, we have more about this and that. Like, they haven't really talked about the gaming thing with it. I feel like Apple has more in store between now and launch. I feel like we're going to get more little mini announcements or events or something to like cover more of this product.
Oh, definitely. I expect that it will share the stage with the iPhone this fall. And, we'll see more of this. And I could also see it being a thing, they said early next year, where maybe really close to it coming out, we learn more about some of the entertainment stuff it can do. Because like you said, and I agree, I think it's going to be the big winner for a lot of people. I think people will find it useful for other things, but I think entertainment's kind of the most obvious one. And from a content creation standpoint, I'm interested to see in what sort of tools and workflows come up to allow those experiences, right? So you mentioned football. I think it's a great example. Well, I want to see what that receiver's route and what direction they took. And if you have a bunch of camera angles and I can just pick one, well, that's fine. That's pretty easy to do now. But like the next level stuff where I can spin the field around as he's making his route and seeing
Exactly.
what's happening, like that's going to require a lot of technology and workflow stuff. And so I'm excited to dig into that in the future as well. Like I am sure at some point in the future on MPU, we will interview somebody who does this sort of stuff, right? Because we're interested in it. And that's all fascinating too. You know, you talk about who the Mac Pro and Mac Studio are for. Those kind of people, right? People doing that sort of work. And I'm almost really, for me, it's like two sides of a coin. I'm very interested in being able to watch basketball and football in this thing in these ways, but I'm also super interested in how they're going to make that work.
Yeah. And I also feel like if you ever played like a sports video game, it's fun to like freeze it and move around and see how And I feel like, why not do that with humans? And I think this is the product that kind of makes something like that possible. Jay wrote in, I've been struggling with the problem David mentioned on 696, legacy iTunes account and iCloud account. And the specific problem he was having is that with his family sharing was about to hit the 2 terabyte limit. And his app, because the Apple One was on the legacy account, he wasn't able to buy the extra 2 terabytes. I mentioned in that show I had the same problem. And what I did was I just added the legacy account to the family, and then I purchased it under that. And that allowed me to get me up to 4 terabytes. And he says, that was brilliant. And first of all, anytime you want to write in to say I'm brilliant, I will take that. Thank you. Although I'm not sure that was my idea. I don't remember. I think I researched it at some point and I read somewhere, but I don't know where to give credit for it. But I don't think I just came up with that out of the blue. I think I heard that somewhere. But yeah, thanks, Jay. Anyway, I'll take it. Glad it helped.
Yeah, me too. And I really just wanted to highlight it again because I think in 696, which we recorded like 3 weeks ago, so who knows how time works, but I just wanted to underline it here because I think a lot of people are going to bump into that now or in the future. I mean, we're at like 1 point something terabytes in my family. And as you know, gave my daughter her first iPhone, as I've mentioned in the past, and that iCloud use is like ticking up. She takes photos and stuff and video on her phone. It gets backed up, and I have iCloud photo library turned on for her. So this is a good thing to know because a lot of people not only run into that, but have that legacy purchasing account, like we said. So I just wanted to kind of put an underline on it here in the feedback episode. I do wish Apple would make this more clear that this is how it can work, and or go above the 4 terabytes. Because I think you said like you're going to be skirting with that here, and potentially not too far away.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and what I'm going to do is like it's going to. A lot of it is my documents, and I'm going to get serious about like taking stuff off the cloud,
Yeah.
Which honestly is probably the opposite of what Apple wants to happen. They want me to be more reliant on their cloud, but I'm going to, like some of the field guide resources and stuff. It was nice having it in the cloud, but the fact is I do all of that on my one production machine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it on the laptop. It's convenient to have it in the cloud, but it doesn't need to be. So I'm going to start like getting serious about that.
Yeah.
Which, like I said, if you're at Apple, you would be like, no, I want him to use our cloud more. I want him to be more dependent on it. So, if they want that, they need to come up with better storage purchases options and ways to increase it. We didn't hear anything about that this week or last week at WWDC.
No, it was real quiet on that front. I did a similar thing when I went from 2 Macs to 1. I had some stuff on Dropbox that was really just there, so I get it from both computers, like if I needed it, but that was rarely the case, right? So I moved some stuff off the cloud just to my local documents folder, and I could definitely do more if I needed to, as long as I'm living the 1 Mac life that I'm doing now. So that is an option as well, right? Kind of reevaluating what you have there. But for most people, the vast majority of it is photos. And it's hard to tell somebody, look, I get to keep my photos in the cloud, but you can't, or you have to like get booted out of the iCloud family. I think Apple needs to revisit lots on iCloud storage, but the upper cap is something that should be on that list.
Yeah, I mean, when you're selling these phones that take these massive pictures and people have kids, and it's just inevitable. So good luck, buddy.
Yeah, and what happens when we're all taking 3D, photo and spatial video and stuff at our kids' birthday parties?
Yeah, exactly.
Those files aren't going to be small.
Yeah, I was thinking, man, that's going to be a big file when that's done. That thing is going to be massive. It's not just a 2D movie; it's a 3D movie. So it's like, how much data are you going to have in there?
It's true.
And every year, the iPhone takes bigger and more, intensive pictures. I mean, it's just, yeah, this is a problem that needs solving. All right. I think that'll do it. Feedback shows are so much fun, Stephen. They go so fast. I'm looking at the clock going like, what happened? We went a little long today. But I love doing these shows. I love hearing from the listeners. Both Steve and I think, want to thank everybody. All the great, kind things you said to us as we were going through WWDC and we got to go do the show at Apple Park. Thanks again to Apple for that. I mean, it's fun being recognized by Apple. We've been working hard at this show for a long time, and we want to make it the best possible content for Mac power users on the internet. Thank you to our sponsors, SaneBox, 1Password, ZocDoc, and Electric. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find that forum over at talk.macpowerusers.com. Stick around if you're a more power user. We got CarPlay stuff to go on with. Otherwise, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.